Good morning, Discovery. Backed by overwhelming popular demand. Well, actually backed by popular demand. Well, actually Todd said, hey, are you gonna do that year-end review? And I was like, yeah, I think I could do it. So backed by that level of demand comes your year-end review. One thing we like to say at Discovery is we take the gospel seriously, but we do not take ourselves seriously. So with that in vain, here goes your year-end review. 2020 was definitely a unique year. There's no better example of that than the Cleveland Browns. The Browns made the playoffs for the first time in 18 years. That's longer than the history of Discovery. In fact, the biggest game in 20 years was played in Cleveland 2 weeks ago. The Browns were allowed to have 12,000 fans at the game. I'm old enough to remember when 12,000 fans was a huge crowd for the Browns just 2 years ago. And I know, they just beat us in the playoffs, but one win isn't going to replace 18 years that easily. For the church, 2020 began with the beginning steps of Relentless. Remember the retro Relentless logo? Our primary goal was to get 100% commitment to relentless generosity to serve those in our community. To fully captivate this powerful feeling, Matt used the following picture. Wow, as a Bronze Bomber fan, that was tough to stomach, but don't worry, the Bomb Squad will be back to get those titles later this year. Now, as you may recall, a few things changed in March, but our staff did a fantastic job of getting us online in no time. In fact, no weekend services were missed. My favorite part of the digital experience was the worship, especially the videography. First of all, I didn't even know the wooden box was an instrument, let alone we had somebody that played the wooden box, like this. My favorite part, though, was the guitar close-ups. It really captured that 80s music video feel. There's nothing like seeing Jack Bush shred on the guitar. Go Jack. One online series that stuck out to me was Tomorrowland. The series allowed us to imagine what heaven might be like. It also featured cameos from future Todd, future Matt, future Kate, and future Sam. I remember shortly afterwards, future me appeared and said, hey, write this down. There's your first end of the year joke. So thanks future me, and thanks future Todd for that one. Another series that stood out was Living by Faith in a Frustrating World. The series featured the curve Matt drew to show our spiritual trajectory of the highs, the lows, and then the ultimate highs. It also inspired our shirts would say, in wherever you live, as it is in heaven. Week in and week out, Matt went back to the whiteboard to reiterate this illustration. We haven't seen that type of commitment to the whiteboard since Tim Russert worked the 2000 election. By the beginning of fall, we were finally able to meet in person again. To ensure everybody's safety, we decided to move service outside. Now, as you may imagine, there are plenty of hurdles to consider when holding an outdoor service. That's why the lead team decided we need some training. So we brought in an ex-Navy SEAL to do some training for the staff. Some of his training tactics included the following. When practicing sermons, Matt and Todd would have flashlights put in their face and squirted with squirt guns to simulate the glare of the sun or a sudden downpour. Kate went through it as well. Travis would come by with a fan and blow away her sheet music just to practice to simulate the gusting of a wind. And I would say they did a great job with the training and the services. My favorite in-person series was You Are Here. It was actually a blend of the online and in-person. And I think we'll all remember this is the one that featured the Discovery staff hiking trip through the Dolly Sod Mountains. It also featured this picture right here. Who could forget this look? Thanks, Prison Matt, for that one. As a congregation, we would like to thank Jason Adamson for being their tour guide. I mean, really, left alone, Matt and Todd kind of had a Blair Witch feel to it for me, so thanks again, Jason, for bringing back our pastors. This series was so popular that we had an overwhelming number of requests to have a Discovery camping trip to the Dolly Sod Mountains. Well, we've got even better news. I'm excited to announce Survivor, Discovery style, coming this summer. Mahaffey Tribe versus Ransom Tribe with Jason playing the role of Jeff Probst. So if you're interested, start putting together those casting videos, send them over to ascott@discovertogether.com for this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Well, 2020 was not an easy year to be a lot of things, especially a pastor. Between a pandemic, the lockdowns, civil unrest, and an election, there was always something to sort through. As a congregation, we rightfully look for our staff to give us a Christ-centered perspective on these matters. However, it's important to note that they were going through the same thing that we were at the same time. They had loved ones they could not visit, their kids were taking classes in their living room, and they were examining their hearts for any unperceived prejudice that there might be. All throughout the process, the staff, the pastors, all of them handled these issues with wisdom and grace. For that, I'm personally thankful, and I'm personally thankful for the positive effect that they've had on my relationship with Jesus Christ and my families as well. So on behalf of the congregation, Discovery staff, we love you. We look forward to 2021, and I look forward to seeing you back next year for the 2021 year-end review. Thanks, Discovery.
Well, hey guys, welcome to Discovery. We're so glad that you're joining us here online. We are in the middle of a series right now called Exodus, a Relentless Movement, and it's an opportunity for us to kind of check in on this 2-year initiative that we've been a part of called Relentless. And we're really excited to kind of see where things are leading and invite some new people to join us on this journey. Right now, we are giving out these free booklets. Let's do a little, unboxing to see what's in here. There we go. Inside, you'll see a ton of information in these books about Relentless, about our church, what's been going on here. So make sure to go through that and check it out. And then after that, we have 35 days of reading through the book of Exodus. It's not just Exodus, it's a lot of other things as well. We put this together in-house, and we're really excited for people to use it, either as a personal kind of devotional thing or maybe to do it with a group. You'll also find in here this Relentless commitment card. This is just a way to kind of think through how you want to be generous with Discovery and kind of commit to the things that are going on here and help us with the mission that God has given us financially. So make sure to check that out. On February 7th, we'll talk more about that. We'll be inviting everybody to make a commitment, whether they already have one, they want to finish strong, or they want to up it, or maybe they're new and they want to jump on board for the very first time. So we're really excited to look forward to that. Just so you guys know too, we've got neighborhood groups. They're starting up just around this time. And so if you still want to be a part of one, we'd love for you to jump in. Again, it's a great way to go through this book, read through the book of Exodus, learn a lot more about the biblical story, and also get to know some great new people. Thanks again for joining us. We're glad you're here at Discovery.
In November of 2019, Discovery began a courageous journey of pursuing God like never before in our faith and through our generosity. And through much prayer and seeking God's direction, the Lee team and the staff of the church put before us a bold vision for Discovery's future that we called Relentless. You know, as our church home gets nearer and nearer to completion, and we prepare to throw open wide the doors to our community, and we feel a close connection to Moses as he faithfully followed God and he led the people out of slavery and into the promised land. Well, God is now calling us to faithfully, to relentlessly follow him as we lead hundreds, maybe thousands of people who right now are enslaved by sin, and to lead them to Jesus, the one who can truly set them free. Therefore, we won't stop. We won't stop asking God what he has next for us. Over the next 5 weeks, we're going to dig deep into the book of Exodus.
Hi, my name is Danny Kubiak. I'm married to my husband Bill for many, many, many years. And we have been with Discovery for about 5 or 6 years. We came here because this is a church whose emphasis is on serving. The best way to help people and show Jesus' love is by serving others. And this is something that's front and center. The way we serve is by being what we call silent servers. And that means that we're not in front, maybe in the big productions, but we try to be silent and listen. Listen to see what needs to be done in the community, in our neighborhoods, for our neighbors, people who might be ill, people who need food, any other kinds of things that we can do from our home that helps support other people in our church and our community. And that's very, very important to us. Let me tell you a little bit about why we committed to the Relentless Project. Can you remember when you got your first new car, or even better, your diamond ring? When you got those things, they were so important to you, and you took care of them relentlessly. You washed them, you shined them, you polished them. You did everything you could to keep them strong and keep vibrant. And that's what discovery means to us through Relentless. The part that we do through service, through financial support, keeps this church strong. And we want to continue doing that. We want to be relentless in our service, however we can do it. You know, why is this important to us? And it's important to us on several levels. First of all, it made us step back and evaluate what the needs are. If this is a service church, what are we doing? And whose needs are we meeting? So we needed to stop by or step back and look at that. And then we needed to step back and look and see, well, how is our church doing this? We know that they're meeting needs. It's a service church, but how are we going to support that? So we support our community, we support the members of our church, and it also means for us, it's a way to show that you love each other. And that's what we talk about a lot, is how we love each other. Jesus loved us, and he demonstrated that many, many ways. And for us, participating financially, physically, it's a way to demonstrate that and carry on the message. What are some of the challenges you have in staying with Relentless? I think that's a good question. I think it's a hard thing to do, especially right now when there's a pandemic. But you have to kind of look at a balance of needs and wants. What do I want to be happy today? What do I really need to be happy? And we had to really examine that, and that was kind of challenging, especially for the holiday season. There's gift buying, there's food, and of course there's Netflix. And so, you have to kind of balance your time out with all of that, right? So for us, it was a commitment to look at that and see what we could do, what we could maybe give up a little bit or change. And to us, participating financially, physically, and just being a support is the best way to keep the church alive and well. I guess to encourage members of Discovery to stay strong and to stay with this commitment of Relentless, think of what we're doing. We're here because we love their values, right? We love the church's values, what they stand for. We love that they serve the community. We want it to stay strong, and we want to be a part of that. Our contributions, whether it's physically or monetarily, they're an investment. They're an investment in the church's life. They're an investment in our own lives. Jesus was the worldwide king of investments. He knew how to invest. He invested in us. He gave us so many lessons. He gave us his life. The least we can do is to recognize that investment, take it and invest it back. And where we would invest it back would be in this Church of Discovery.
A few weeks ago, my wife Sam and I, we went out of town to visit family as safe as possible, okay? While we were gone, we gave our key to some of our neighbors, Scott and Tanisha Faber. When you're parents of young kids during a pandemic, I'm sure many of you know, it's pretty nice to have a place to go to have some alone time, or so I'm told. They made our place a kind of sanctuary for them for that week. But when we got back into town, we were surprised to see a perfect prank waiting for us. Sam made a video of it. Check it out. As you saw, sets of googly eyes were placed everywhere throughout our house. We're still finding them now. It's funny how they kind of bring these objects to life. It made it look like a new character in a Pixar movie. Like our trash can or our toilet seat, you might say it was uncanny. One simple addition makes these ordinary objects light up your imagination. It creates characters complete with personalities and hopes and dreams and life stories. And I'll be honest, it even felt a little cruel to kind of gouge their little eyes off. I knew those objects weren't really alive, but at the time it kind of felt like it. Today we're picking back up the story of Exodus where we left off. We find Moses staring down an impossible task, finally somewhat convinced that God, the God of all possibilities, is going to be with him. Reluctantly, Moses has accepted God's mission to go free his people from slavery, to face off against Pharaoh and the Egyptian political and military machine to help his oppressed people. Exodus 7 frames Moses' confrontation with Pharaoh, the second act of the Exodus story, like this. Then the Lord said to Moses, pay close attention to this. I will make you seem like God to Pharaoh, and your brother Aaron will be your prophet. Tell Aaron everything I command you. And Aaron must command Pharaoh to let the people of Israel leave his country. Pharaoh will refuse to listen to you. It says he'll grow hard-hearted. So I will bring down my fist on Egypt. Then I will rescue my people, the Israelites, from the land of Egypt with great acts of judgment. When I raise my powerful hand and I bring out the Israelites, then the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord alone. So God is predicting that this won't be easy. The people can't simply just leave. The military will stop them, probably with considerable casualties. Instead, God himself will act in grand and obvious ways to make this as peaceful as possible, but still with his divine judgment, he says. It says that will open up the impossible path for them toward freedom. See, God's judgment, of course, means both discernment and appropriate consequences. For what, you might ask? Who is he judging in this case of judgment? Well, the Egyptian culture had embraced slavery and subjugation and racism over the course of centuries. God was going to have to do something drastic to shock the entrenched Egyptian society out of its broken culture. And Pharaoh is the embodiment of that. Pharaoh is a human representative of the ancient Egyptian culture at its worst. He's depicted as the most evil, monstrous character in the Bible so far. On the other hand, Moses is God's representative. And so at one level, you have Moses and Pharaoh talking, but the real conflict is on another level between God and the Egyptian culture. And their culture, like many other ancient ones, was built on the idea of false gods or idols. This part of Exodus, chapter 6 through 12, is a story of God going to war against their broken system by attacking their gods. There were many, many of them in Egypt, but just to kind of name a few, there was Ra. Maybe you've heard of that one. He was one of the greatest. He was the god of the sun. After all, the sun is Earth's battery. It's what fuels our food sources and brings light and heat that allows us to survive. You can see how you might make that into a god. There was also Hecate, who was a god of fertility, oftentimes depicted like a frog. That's kind of important for this specific story. There was Neper and Nepri, who you prayed to if you wanted a great grain production. There was Happy, who was the godly representation of the Nile's flooding season. I know that's very specific, but the Nile was so important. It had like 3 or 4 different gods attached to it. It was the lifeblood of Egypt. Maybe you've heard of Isis, the god of health, or Imhotep, the god of healing. And we must not forget the most important god of Egypt in our story was Pharaoh himself. He was worshipped, treated, and trusted as the God in power, the divine intermediary between God and the people, the great protector of Egypt's stability. One of my favorite literary devices is called personification. You take an abstract concept and you turn it into a character. Pixar's Inside Out is a perfect example of this. Throughout literature, this is a reoccurring way to communicate something deeper about those concepts. You kind of bring them to life. You take an inanimate object and you stick the googly eyes on them. I think the ancient gods essentially are a kind of extreme version of personification. Historically, humans have been really, really good at basically putting googly eyes on our greatest fears, personifying them so we can ask them for help or protection. They'd make a visual representation of it. They build their temples to worship it. They make sacrifices of their stuff to please this god so that what they were most afraid of wouldn't happen, or at least so they could have someone to blame when things went horribly wrong. The Bible consistently points out how ridiculous it is to put googly eyes on things, to make them your God. For example, in Isaiah, there's one really striking condemnation of it. It says, the person who made the idol never stops to reflect. Why? It's just a block of wood. I burned half of it for heat and used it to bake my bread and roast my meat. How can the rest of it be a God? Should I bow down to worship a piece of wood? The poor, deluded fool feeds on ashes. He trusts something that can't help him at all. Yet he cannot bring himself to ask, and listen to this question, is this idol I'm holding in my hand a lie? See, I love that last question. It seems so illogical. How silly. It's just googly eyes that you're putting on your problems or your concerns or your frustrations. I wonder, though, is it really that different from today? Many of the anxieties of the ancient world, they didn't disappear, they just evolved. And maybe so have the many ways that people worship idols. Our anxieties become obsessions that become projections that even sometimes still become personifications. When we revolve our lives around pursuing what we think will give us the good life, we might not think of them this way, but they become idols, false promises to save us from our fears and give us a better life, a good life, the one that we really want. I tried to put some googly eyes on some of the new gods that I've seen in my neighborhood and in an area like Cranberry, trying to personify some of our greatest anxieties. I'm not good at it, by the way, so it's pretty cheesy and it sounds a little bit like Transformers sometimes, but just stick with me for a second. The first one is Achievacon. The God of success. We have these elaborate temples for his worship called office campuses. You can worship him through sacrifices of things like family time or your rest time or your play time or your moral conscience with all the compromises you have to make. If you give him every ounce of your ambition, your creativity, and your joy and your identity, he might just bless you with that thing that you want the most, significance. He seemingly arbitrarily grants that gift. But his priests say, if you hustle hard enough, he will glorify you. But some lifelong adherents suggest that if you worship Achievacon, you might just be part of a con. Another one is the Donkophant. Half of his body is donkey, the other half elephant. Depending on which side you're looking from, it will appear differently to you. This God thrives on fanatic allegiances through creating polarization. It's brilliant, really. He's the master of telling tales, of spinning stories to fit what you think you want to hear. And so in doing that, he gains your trust. It's brilliant because as his worshipers hate each other, it fuels them to worship him more. His priests perform services in all kinds of temples, for example, Fox News and MSNBC. He hates open-minded conversation. He loves angry name-calling because it brings out more passion from both sides that fuels him. Don't you dare listen to the facts or reasonable arguments because it might loosen his power. Stubborn, unchangeable, prideful minds give him strength. The most righteous thing you can do in his mind is to block, cancel, name call, or run from anyone who thinks differently. Okay, that one's a little bit too real, so let's lighten it up a little bit. Thirdly, Kevin from The Office, the God of binge watching and comfort. This God reminds you that your goal, the pinnacle of your life is the Office marathon tonight at 10 p.m. or this Saturday. It's the next achievement in that video game. He demands at least 4 hours of worship a day, and many of us give that to him. But the more the better. He promises to distract you from all your anxieties, at least for a little while, at least while you're paying attention. But in my experience, maybe yours too, I strangely wake up from these worship sessions more drained than when I started. Are you like me and ever tempted to worship those gods or maybe some other ones? See, those are just a couple examples of the American gods that shape our culture. You might be able to think of more. I was going to talk about the way that we worship romance in our culture or how we live vicariously through our kids, but I'm not a parent yet, so I'm not going to deal with that. I'll let Matt deal with that another time. There's nothing wrong with wanting to achieve or having strong opinion or watching a funny show. Don't hear that. False gods aren't based on bad things. They come from good things that have become corrupted by our obsessions. As Tim Keller has pointed out about idols, when good things become ultimate things, they then become destructive things. That's the heart of idolatry. False gods don't need to have faces, they don't need to have googly eyes to demand your worship. When we give some goal or status the focal point of our lives and we orient ourselves toward that goal instead of seeing everything through our pursuit of God, we set ourselves up for failure and disappointment. But it's not always easy to see this happening until it's too late. We swim in a culture of gods like many of the Egyptians did, and sometimes worshiping false gods is as easy as breathing until we take a second to reevaluate. When we trust them to resolve for us the angst we have or bring us the hope we need, we will always lose ourselves. We've seen a lot of that recently. I was hit pretty hard this year and disappointed when two of my heroes in the church with pretty big names were found out and admitted to sexual scandals. They chose to sacrifice a lot at the altar of a good time, and it wasn't worth their worship. We've seen the worship of political heroes and ideologies result in blatant political cults storming the Capitol building. We've seen name-calling and conspiratorial thinking becoming the norm because we worship a false narrative that makes us feel better or more control. We've even seen the gods of freedom and rights worshipped far above the common good. If you've ever been to the remote parts of the world, you know how precious clean water is. Many incredible efforts have been launched to bring clean water to these people, fundraisers and hard work and teams that go and dig these wells. And those people need it quite a bit. In fact, one of the people out of our church, Chris, who you saw a little bit earlier, he leads a group of students that help fundraise for this at North Allegheny High School through a dodgeball tournament. It's pretty cool. But few know that well diggers oftentimes face an unexpected challenge. One of the hardest parts is convincing the people that need this water that it's worth maintaining the clean water source. And so the drillers oftentimes send someone whose primary job it is to explain to them that their old water source they've been drinking from their whole lives was actually making them sick, and that this new water, this clean water, over time will renew their health. A pastor named Kyle Eitelman, he tells a story about one of those people who was sent to try to explain this. In the report that he gave back, this is what he writes. He said that one of the most frustrating things about his job is when his team visits the villages later to check on the wells. More often than not, parts are broken and haven't been replaced, filters have gone unchanged, and the majority of the villages continue to drink from the wells that they were used to, the ones making them sick. They've returned to what they know. They have to be convinced that the water they've been drinking forever, their whole lives, is poisonous. And they have to work to keep the filters clean on the pure water. See, humans are thirsty, but we keep drinking tainted water. It satisfies our initial thirst, but it ultimately makes us sick. God wants so badly for us to come straight to the source, to come to Him. That's what our bodies, our souls, ourselves were designed to drink. If we focus on Him, He becomes the filter that keeps our good desires in the rightful place. Our ambitions become healthy, our opinions are shaped by Him, our practices of rest are actually restful. And yet we keep returning to what we know, our poisonous gods. We keep worshiping the God we know, not the God we need. What was the line from Isaiah that we just read? Yet we cannot bring ourselves to ask, is this idol that I'm holding in my hand a lie? Have we been believing the false promises of false gods? Lots of good things have been turned into ultimate things, and people have lost themselves in the madness it creates. In Exodus, God is going to war for their sake. They had built their society around their greatest fears, their anger, their insecurities. No matter how illogical it was, the list of gods in the ancient world, there's simply a list of the things that the culture was most anxious about. War, famine, poverty, fertility. They focused all their attention on achieving, protecting, and guaranteeing those things. And in the end, it had made them cruel. The Bible says it had made their leader and representative, Pharaoh, hard-hearted. Last week, Matt reminded us of some simple math. Us plus God equals all that we need. We regularly try to replace God in that equation, or we add to this equation. Nothing else fits into this. Your political party doesn't fit into the equation. Your career doesn't fit into the equation. Your health doesn't fit into the equation. Your sex life doesn't fit in the equation. But we keep trying to jam that stuff in, only to find on the other side, any of those additions turns into division. Adding anything to that equation actually tears us apart. So God looks down on Egypt and sees just how bad it's gotten, how far they've gone, how these gods, including Pharaoh, have trapped his people. And one by one, God begins to illustrate for them that their gods have no control over the things that they're worried about the most. That there's only one God. The plagues don't last long, but they do make an impression that everything the Egyptian culture trusted in had no power. Imhotep was impotent. It's really hard to say, by the way. Over the next few days or weeks or even months, the story goes that God begins to unleash a series of what we famously call plagues. And between each one, Pharaoh is given a chance to listen, a chance to change his mind and to soften his heart. But every time he refuses, God responds. So the lifeblood of Egypt, the Nile, where the Hebrew babies were thrown, it turns into blood. Hapi isn't happy about that one. Frogs, again, representing the god of fertility, they multiply, they take over the country for a day, kind of ironically. Gnats, flies, locusts, they come and damage their crops. Hail shrinks their livestock. Darkness covers their land, showing that even the great Ra, the most consistent God of all, can't protect them. And lastly, most painfully, lives are taken. Although God, unlike Pharaoh, provides an opportunity for protection, he provides a way out. See, the plagues pronounce that what they worshipped isn't worth it. All their fears and anxieties can come true in a matter of moments, and only one being is capable of giving them the stability, the peace, the protection, the dignity that they really need. That's why the story of the plagues ends like it begins. It has this phrase, it says, "I will execute judgment against all the gods of Egypt, for I am the Lord." God was coming to rescue his people from the false gods and the oppressive culture that kept them trapped. The worship of the gods of Egypt was more damaging to the world than the plagues God sent on Egypt. This story can be hard for us to digest in 2021, but as one of my friends suggested, maybe it's because we're more like the powerful Egyptians than the oppressed Hebrew slaves. We're worshiping all the wrong gods, and it's causing all kinds of damage, and it makes me wonder, what would a plague look like if they were brought on our culture, our lifestyle, or our gods? See, the story of the plagues feels a little different after 2020, doesn't it? A little too real. I don't think God caused the pandemic at all. I think it's a natural result of our broken world, but I do think this year was like a plague in fact, it probably helped reveal to you some of the things that you trusted too much in. It showed us the fragility of medicine, of our bodies, of our economy, of our kids' programming, of our school systems, of our schedules, of our distractions, and of our leaders. So the question for us in 2021 is, can we rebuild our lives after this plague based on a better God, a purer source of water? Here's the thing. Something someday will show you what you really worship, if it hasn't already. If it didn't happen last year, someday a plague is coming for your gods. Not from God necessarily, but just because the thing we oftentimes worship, they're really fragile. So how do we perform maintenance on our clean water well? How do we trust in the right things? Here's my best suggestion. Number one, name your gods. You cannot address what you do not name or acknowledge. Kyle Edelman, in that same book, he offers a series of helpful diagnostic questions for this. Here's some of them. Maybe you want to write them down and just ask them to yourself later. Maybe one of them sticks out to you more than another one. What disappoints you? What do you complain the most about? Where do you make financial sacrifices? What most makes you anxious, angry, or insecure? Where do you go to find rest? What do you daydream about? So the answers to those questions might not point to anything bad, but they'll likely point to something that you're prone to worship. Secondly, put googly eyes on them. Demote them from your priorities, your schedule, your budget, your daydreaming. Stop taking yourself or your gods so seriously. Make them hilarious. You put googly eyes on anything, it suddenly becomes ridiculous. Our little g gods are silly, even the ones that represent something good. That might mean getting rid of it for a time. Delete Facebook, swear off your favorite cable news channel, quit the job, stop drinking, unsubscribe. Find the ways you're worshiping your false gods and take a break. And then lastly, rhythmically worship the real God. Replace your old habits with new ones. Prioritize practices that focus your attention on God. Worship is simply any action that acknowledges the worth of something else. This is why we talk so much about regular rhythms of prayer, reading the Bible, serving others. They're the clean, well-maintenance schedule. You know, in a minute here, we're going to have a song that will help you do that. We know it's weird when it's online, but it's crucial that we keep this practice going. It helps rewire our brains. It cleans out our filters, and we learn to drink deeply from the only source that can make our soul healthy. So sing out loud for your kids to hear. Turn up the volume if you're a little off key. Worship is bigger than singing, but singing is a helpful part of it. See, the big idea for today is simply this. What we worship will shape who we become. If we worship the wrong things, we will live the wrong way every single time. But if we prioritize worshiping Jesus, we'll become more like him in every single way. One of Jesus' closest followers wrote a letter that's all about living a life of love and maturity. It's in that letter that he boldly declares that God is love. But the letter ends abruptly saying this, almost pleading with them. Dear children, keep away from anything that might take God's place in your heart. See, it's as if he's saying this idol, these false gods that they're worshiping, these are the biggest things standing in your way of real love, of a loving lifestyle, and of even loving life itself. We're talking about this now because as we move forward as a church, we have to keep our idols in check. I don't just mean that as a staff or leadership team. I mean you. You are the church. Our false gods are going to keep us from serving the one true God, and he's got really, really good things waiting for us. One of my favorite themes throughout the story of the plagues is that the Egyptian people, Pharaoh never really changes his mind, but many of his people do. See, the biggest difference between God and Pharaoh as they go to war is that God always gives a warning and a way out. God protects his people through the plagues, and the Egyptian people are offered the same opportunities again and again, and slowly but surely they start to respond. They start to take advantage of them. They protect their livestock. They grow sympathetic towards the Hebrew people. I bet that even when the last plague was coming around, many Egyptians practiced the Passover to protect their children. Because at the end, even some of the Egyptians leave Egypt knowing they'll have a better life among the people of God. Because it was centered around someone who could actually help them find peace in their anxieties. There was always hope for the Egyptians too, to be freed and protected from the failures of their false gods. And there will always be hope for us also. Only God can lead us towards true freedom. My little sister is 28 years younger than me, long story. Due to a medical condition, the bone in her legs are crooked. She can't walk on it well, and it's incredibly fragile. But this week, she had a brand new surgery where they inserted 2 simple screws, and over time, her leg will grow straighter. Trusting in God is a lot like that. It's a simple surgery that introduces a simple change in your life. It makes you more strong, it makes you more stable, and maybe, and not immediately, but over time, it will make you stronger and stronger and stronger. As you drink deeply from that cleaner water, your soul will grow more healthy. Every week we practice a worship practice that helps us do this. We reorient our hearts by centering our attention on who Jesus was and is. And I'd encourage you to stop taking all these other things that you're worshiping so seriously, but do take this moment seriously. Grab some bread and some juice, something that reminds you of Jesus' body and blood broken, poured out, and raised to life for you and me. And as we worship, reflect on those false gods that you're tempted to worship, those questions about what makes you disappointed or anxious or complain the most. The ones that keep you up at night, the ones that make you angry or insecure or numb. Imagine putting googly eyes on them, and then imagine emptying them out of your body and replacing them with Jesus as you eat and drink his grace.
Through every battle, through every heartbreak, through every circumstance, I believe you are my fortress, you are my portion, you are my hiding place. Oh, I believe you are the way, the truth, to